Welcome to the My Friend the Friar podcast, and thanks for listening. If you like My Friend the Friar and want to support us, please consider subscribing or following us if you haven't already done so. And if you found us on YouTube, then don't forget to click the notification bell when you subscribe so you'll be notified of new episodes when they release. Thanks again, and God bless. Record. Is it working? Yes. I hate technology. People who work in IT hate technology.
It happens. People who stay on the phone all day never want to take a phone call.
Yes. No, I am positive. I know Father Stephen and I have recorded whole episodes and forgot to hit record or something like that. But I feel like you and I and him, we tried it one time and then something went wrong. And so we had to do the whole thing again.
We did it online.
Was it remote? Yeah,
we
that's
did
right.
it remote, and then he was in town, so we had empanadas and had a great morning.
That's right. I definitely want to get him to come talk about liturgy.
I do too.
Oh my gosh.
I really would. I mean, one of my favorite things about your podcast is listening to Father Stephen and just leaving feeling like I've been educated.
I know.
about like so much of the behind the scenes, so much of like, how does this all fit together? How does it integrate together? Which for me is always really helpful because that's the way I tend to think. Like I want to see those elements in the bigger picture.
Yeah. I guess when you got, this is so unfair way of saying this. When you got nothing else to do all day, but sit around and contemplate things and study.
I think that's actually his vocation.
No, that guy, he is so bored all the time. He does nothing. I hope he's listening. He does nothing literally all day long.
What's the nature of the charism of his order again? Is it contemplative?
Sleeping in, eating whenever you feel like it.
Cutting wood.
Yeah, chopping broccoli.
Watching Babylon 9.
Yeah, yeah, Babylon 9 and I can't think on the spot. I was going to try and make fun of Star Trek or Star Wars or something. His sci-fi movies. Yeah, the dude literally does nothing. No, when you have as much, because he lives such a blessed life, he has so many opportunities to study and think and learn. And so the guy learns, he knows so much. And he the way you're like, oh, I have to relearn how to like take notes when I read stuff. I think that's the only way he reads. Yeah. And so
part of that's probably because he's an itinerant preacher, and because he's so engaged in terms of like supporting his order in holding retreats and stuff. He's also being blessed with this opportunity to then try to explain it, and then try to sharpen that. And so that's only going to make whoever you are, like you're a teacher, Yeah. The more you have to try to teach something, the better ultimately you're going to understand it. Yeah.
And so it's almost, he's moved a couple times now. And it's like he has this personal library that kind of follows him around because of all the notes he's taken and all the books that he's read and stuff like that. And you just be talking to him. He's like, oh, I think I got a book on that. You know what I mean? Or I think I've got notes on that. I'll go find something. And then sends you an 11-page long email kind of thing. Who does that? But anyway, now I don't even remember. We're making fun of, I was picking on him. Now I don't remember where I was going with it. He knows so much. And so sometimes, not because I'm a super fan or anything, I'll go back and listen to our old episodes. And it's just like learning something all over again. It's, oh my gosh, there's so much here that I could listen to this over and over again.
Your episodes on the Protestant Reformation were...
that historical stuff blew my mind because I had no idea the consequences of the Renaissance, and we're literally still dealing with it.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It's amazing stuff.
That's right.
Anyway, so we'll definitely have to get him on. Something else that I'd love to do? I'd love to do a retreat at Mary Lake. But I don't know if I don't know how to. I think we've even talked about this
we have,
before.
And I think we just need to get on the trip list and
or
start
something.
asking
Just
people who would be up. And,
yeah.
Here's the. But I think what we talked about is we need to set out like, here's when it would be, here's how much it would cost, here's what we're looking at. Thoughts?
Yeah, because it's just beautiful out there, and especially the pictures that Father sent me in the fall. Because
How long is the drive?
5 hours.
Yeah, that's not terrible.
Yeah, it's not well for Texas, right? That's like going
that's
anywhere
barely
in
outside
Texas.
the border.
Yeah, and so because you can drive 12 and still be in Texas, so it's not too bad. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful, but I think
Arkansas is. I think it's an underrated gem. Like every picture you see of Arkansas, you're like, wow, why doesn't everybody live there? That's amazing.
I know it. Arkansas is a silly place, in my mind, because it's so beautiful, and you have family in Oklahoma, or you spend much time up there?
I've been to Beaver Dam. That's what it's called, right?
Oh, Beaver's Bend?
Yeah.
Like Broken Bow, like
Broken
up
Bow.
there? Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually that's where we went a couple weeks ago for vacation.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. But it's real similar to like small town East Texas kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
But it's like everywhere. So it's weird. You got like Little Rock, which is a decent sized little town. And then everything else is just kind of East Texas. And it's
little
just kind of, so it's such an interesting place to me, but it is gorgeous. I would consider living in Arkansas. I don't know if I would, but I'd consider it at least.
Yeah.
Just because how beautiful it is.
If I was the kind of person to have a summer home, I'd consider that. Although ultimately, I think Robin would say, "No, we're doing it in Tyler."
Tyler's not a bad little town.
That's where she grew up. Is outside Tyler.
Really?
So yeah. So I mean, she's got a lot of heart for the Piney East Texas woods. And it's insanely gorgeous out there.
Yeah. Yeah. That whole east side of Texas is like that, all up and down I guess it's the Red River still. Yeah, that's the eastern border. You get down towards Sam Houston and stuff like that. It's just still so pretty.
Yeah.
So what's going on, man? Like, are you still working in the same place? You still with USAA?
No. I went to Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo.
Yeah. So, it's important to work with somebody who's got your back, right? And I mean, there's lots of studies. People don't leave jobs; they leave bosses.
Managers, yeah.
So I've worked with a few bosses who absolutely were sponsors. Like they wanted what was best for me, and I knew it. And they saw value in me. They appreciated what I brought to the table, and that's like any relationship, right? Like you want to have that kind of a relationship where you both see the good in each other, and you're both getting, being improved in that relationship. And so I lost that when he left, and just for various reasons, did not want to stay where I was at, and an opportunity came up to come join him and to help him with that. For me, like most of my professional life, like what I've been interested in is how do I help drive true transformation to improve what's there. Probably a part of my personal need to control things and to make them better. But
yeah, like I can fix this.
They're doing that.
Yeah,
they're doing that. So like so I followed him over there. So
That's
I've been
cool.
a year over there.
Nice. What you're still in your old pickup truck. What's Grant driving?
A Versa Note hatchback.
Versa Note.
Yeah, Nissan. So it's a Nissan Versa, which is like smaller than the standard sedan.
Is it still 4-door?
It's a 4-door, and a hatchback.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, honestly, it's been ideal for him because you fold down the seats in the back. You've got the hatchback, like he can move.
Put some stuff in there.
He basically moved himself out of the dorm and into the apartment with that.
Grant's a cool kid, man.
Yeah.
Well, I say kid because your kids are supposed to still be.
Not anymore, dude. I mean, 19 and 23.
It's so weird. It's like we were just saying, like time goes by real fast.
It does.
Real fast. I remember Sophia. I remember teaching her. I was going to say teaching her to ride her bike. I think it was kind of a collective effort because she got a lot of instruction from various places, like her grandparents, and like her dad, and so lots of people, I think, kind of worked out. But I remember working with her to get good at riding her bike. And it just seems like yesterday.
Yeah.
You know? And I think I remember her drawing pictures. I'd get the weirdest pictures. Little kids make the weirdest pictures. So, I don't know. What would you, if here's a loaded question. If you could have done something with your children while they were younger that you didn't do or you wish you had done more of, what would it be?
Probably, especially when they were quite young, probably more of like family vacations to interesting destinations. Because I got to do a few of those things. When they got older, like when they're teens, they don't want to spend any time with you anyways. Right?
Yeah.
But like we went to Montana together to Big Sky. And that, I've got a lot of happy memories from that. And we went to Rockport right before the hurricane tore it up for a summer vacation. And that was beautiful memories. I got to go with Jillian when she was in 6th grade, I think, to DC after I'd lived and worked there. And like it was a school tour basically of all the, the sites.
Yeah.
Kind of wish I'd done more of that.
Did you know one of the largest is kind of an arbitrary term, but one of the largest trees in Texas is in Rockport?
Is it still standing?
Yeah, it's an oak tree. And when I say largest, it's
diameter or height?
Yeah, just the diameter of the trunk. It's just this massive old oak tree that just has a huge base, but then it's not super tall and it just sprawls out everywhere. You been on A&M's campus?
Yeah.
There's like a engagement tree or something like that. It kind of makes this little bridge over a pathway, and lots of the kids like to get engaged under it, kind of thing. But
That's
anyway,
not where Robin and I got engaged.
Yeah. Where'd y'all get engaged?
At my apartment in Bedford.
Perfect. It's no better place.
No,
that's where Betty and I got engaged.
At my apartment?
Yeah, in Bedford.
That's
yeah.
so weird.
Yeah, random. No, but I just learned that the other day. It's either the biggest or the oldest or something like that. But it's like they've got documentation of it from, I don't know, like Spanish captains that were like exploring the Gulf Coast and stuff way back in the day, because it's just this massive, beautiful old oak tree kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I have a much greater appreciation for where we grew up than I did when I was like in my 20s.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my 20s, it was just painful to go home. But now, like, that's such a beautiful area and it's so full of history. And, it's not like a big resort area, but
it's a little Arkansas-y, just it's this little kind of silly place down there.
It's, if you're not from the coast, like going into a hotel and it's smelling like seawater is a little bit weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I was having a conversation with someone else the other day, and we were talking about what it would be like to live kind of Groundhog's Day, the same kind of day over and over and over and over again. But just meaning that nothing really ever changes. Yeah. It's just day in and day out. It's the same old thing. If you lived on the coast, if you lived at a beach, would it be so bad that nothing ever changes? And the other people are like, oh, yeah, eventually you just get tired of it. You'd be wanting something more. And growing up down there, for me, I was kind of thinking, yeah, I don't think it'd be that bad.
I don't think it'd be bad, but I think you do take it for granted. I remember we took a band trip to Colorado, and somebody, like, we were talking to strangers, some other kids, and they said, oh, you grew up on the beach? Like, you must have gone on the beach every day. I'm like, do you go build snowmen every day? No, of course not. Like,
yeah.
No, I mean...
But so maybe when you're young, you have a certain perspective. But thinking about it now, I don't know. As you get older, and you develop that appreciation.
If I lived where I grew up, I'd probably be wading out and fishing at least once a week, every week.
Right? And Absolutely. So the fact that nothing ever changes, you're kind of like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, if it's the right... if it's a happy circumstance.
Yeah, because it's a very simple life down there. It's very... I kind of wish. Well, and Corpus is it's starting to get a little bit big, like 300,000 ish. Yeah. But I love the little places like Rockport, Port Aransas Pass. These little fishing towns.
Yeah.
And I hope they always just stay like that, because when you get too big, you kind of lose your identity, and it's
or your identity changes. But,
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like with kids. Things are going to change. They do change. I think what was interesting about Groundhog Day was something changed. It was Bill Murray.
Mm-hmm.
I think didn't you do an episode where y'all talked a little bit about how like there was people who talked about how that's kind of actually a fairly Catholic movie?
I don't know. We talk about a lot of movies.
You do.
I don't know. Maybe.
You do. If you were trapped in that movie, if you were trapped in the same day every day, legitimately the same day every day, what would that do to what you think about God?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that was us, but that's a very interesting... See, I think the reason I don't know if that was us talking about it is because in my mind, that's a very novel, interesting thought. So like now I want to go watch that movie again. But yeah, how you're the thing that has to change. Because you can't... As much as you try to change everything else, you can't.
Right. You're not in control. Well, and not only that, but when did he finally start to find joy? Is when he gave up on all of his past and all of his illusions of control and started appreciating and being grateful for the opportunities that he had.
Yeah. Well, and as he sought love more than self, right? And he's like, he's like, I don't want to go to sleep because when I go to sleep, it's going to be over, kind of thing.
Right.
Mm. So.
I hit the cord on the mic. I think that's going to come through.
Yeah, it's probably terrible. We'll fix it in post-production. I will have to say, Father Stephen was a little bit concerned about what you're being, how you're being educated in your formation when you were asking me the other day about space aliens. He's like, oh no, what are they talking about?
He appreciates. Okay, so the question is...
Yes. And I do think he's said something on this topic already in some like early episode.
Did he?
Maybe.
I don't think so. Well, if he did, I didn't make the connection. But my question was like, I've got lots of Betty-esque kinds of questions.
Yep. Why is it purple? Why is it purple? That's what Father Stephen always says. Why is it purple? That's a Betty question. Yeah.
If we knew that there were aliens,
yes,
and they were intelligent,
yes,
what would that mean in light of the crucifixion and resurrection? In light of that, would we believe, for example, that they each had a Christ who died? And like, I'm assuming like they're not exactly like us. I mean, that doesn't mean like they're tentacled monsters. Maybe it means that they're Klingons or whatever. But if they're not really of our species, would it mean that Christ would have to die as one of them and rise? Would it mean that they're not truly sons and daughters of God? Would it mean because that didn't happen? We would still be like, obviously we're told to preach the gospel to all of creation. So we would still preach the gospel. Yep. But what gospel would we preach? Would we preach, but sorry, Jesus didn't die for your sins?
Yeah. So
You're
there's
like a dog.
Yeah. So I say, let's pull this apart and let's look at each piece. I have another friend, Stephen. As Father Stephen says, you have no other Stephens. It's not possessive or anything. No, I have a Stephen I grew up with, real close. Anyway, he had told me once upon a time of this book, and I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but what was interesting, it was a sci-fi novel, and what was interesting about this book is there were either three alien races or humanity plus two. I can't remember. Maybe it's, but I feel like the number 3 is what's coming out in my head. So there's 3 different races, and each of them had a conception or an understanding of there being one God. And that's part of this theme of this book, is trying to understand, like, well, if there is this one God, do we all have the same God? What does that look like for all of us? I'll have to ask him what the name of the book is. But anyway, so So
there is a series written by Julian May about basically higher mind powers, and she was greatly influenced by Catholic thought. Like she quotes Pierre de Talhard like constantly, and like one of her main characters is Catholic, who explains to her son that the other races of this galactic milieu all had Christ events in their history, and they all, they all believed in one way or the other that was, that they had been saved that way.
Yeah. So something that, so let's look at this. The Bible is our salvation history, right?
Yes.
It's not like scientific history, it's our salvation history. So the Bible talks about how humanity falls and how humanity is saved.
Right.
So does that mean that there are no other beings in the universe that God made in his image? Not necessarily, because it doesn't talk about it. Does it mean that they fell too? Because I guess the question is, did creation fall?
Did God create more than one garden? Did he create more than one creature that was both physical and spiritual?
Mm-hmm. Because if creation fell, and a lot of people say, well, that's why the lions eat sheep or whatever, right? Like things kill each other because creation changed at the fall of humanity. But does that necessarily mean that another race is fallen as well, or could they have been preserved from it? So if they were preserved from it, then they don't need a Christ figure. If they were
preserved from it, then they would be living in communion with God.
So that could be interesting.
Which, at least in this world, in this universe, I think creation is fallen. Like, I think this creation is, which doesn't preclude God from having created other creations. But I think necessarily if they were on a planet in our universe, like that's a part of this creation, and we know that this creation, like the spiritual beings and the corporeal beings, both fell. Yeah.
Okay, so then if that's the case, then Christ's crucifixion is redemptive to humanity, not creation, right? That's the second coming, when everything is redeemed and like
not fish and trees and birds, right?
So then the question is, can you have a conscience or a conscious being, highly intelligent, physical, all that kind of stuff, but are they necessarily made in the quote-unquote image of God?
Well, I mean, we
so do they have that kind of soul?
Right? We know that they have to have a soul, right? We know that they have to have, seek to discern the truth. They would likely have a conscience, right? I mean, if we met like a bug race that just, like I don't think we would, regardless of how intelligent they appeared. But I also, like, Christ died once and for all for our sins, but we are made present, we are represented to that every time we celebrate the Mass. It is because God is outside of time, because God is not constrained by time, he created time. I could envision a scenario in which, 8-foot blue creatures, or whatever the avatars were. I could imagine a scenario where they had a Christ figure, and that passion was united outside of our comprehension to the one passion, that it is all one passion that just occurred in different places, because his passion is occurring all around our globe at the same
24
time,
hours,
all the time.
Yeah.
So it could be possible.
So the conundrum lies in if the human Christ was assumed bodily into heaven, and then alien Christ was assumed bodily into heaven, now are there multiple Christs
Well,
in
Christ on the road to Emmaus did not look like Christ on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And Christ appeared to the apostles multiple times in ways that they didn't initially recognize
the gardener and all that kind of stuff.
So if he could change his human appearance, why couldn't he change his appearance to be a big tall alien with a tail? Like, why? When we already know that that our glorified bodies will be so completely different than what we've got, because of that reunification with God, because of the restoration of justice and holiness, why couldn't he be all of those things? Yeah. Because the mystery there isn't that he became necessarily human in heaven. It's that he became unified like we are, body and soul in heaven. And now that means that God is body and soul.
Do you think
I don't, by the way, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know.
As somebody who's in formation, I probably feel like I have to say, I don't know if any of this is
asterisk footnote.
Correct.
Yeah. So I wonder if it would be like you're a human, I'm a space alien, and we're in heaven, and I'm looking at Jesus, and you're looking at Jesus. You see him as a human, I see him as a alien. Right? Maybe our perception is such that it's particular to.
Yeah. Or maybe, our perceptions will change such that we'll see beyond the flesh when we're finally fully resurrected, and actually know each other the way God knows us. Actually see all of who you are and not be distracted by the accidents of, well, you got a beard.
Yeah.
Or you're overweight.
You got 16 arms. Yeah. Or space alien eyes or something.
Yeah, I would look amazing with 16 arms.
Yeah. That'd be cool. It is interesting.
There was actually another hard sci-fi book by a Canadian author. I can't remember his name. And the entire premise of this was we met these aliens, and the scientists that were working with these aliens were shocked to realize they took the existence of God as a proven, undeniable fact, as axiomatically true. Like, the aliens kept getting confused because the human scientists were arguing, there's no such thing as God. Like, why would you possibly believe that?
Yeah.
That's so unscientific to believe that there's no God.
Yeah.
So I think about that sometimes just because of the stuff that I've read. And I wondered, what would that look like? And if they had no history of that, would we say, well, of course they have no soul? Or would the church say, well, maybe they're just not yet incorporated into it?
Yeah. What if water was deadly to them? How do you baptize them? You know what I mean? If they didn't have a Christ figure, and then Christ's like, well, you're welcome to join the church. You're welcome to become a son and daughter of Christ, of God. But I can't baptize you because then you'll melt or something like that.
I mean, as a thought exercise, like, that would be interesting. Although, I mean, the way that the universe is constructed, like, water is the universal solvent, and it has such weird properties. Like, Lee Strobel, in The Case for a Creator, goes on and on and on about how bizarre water is, like, physically, and how it's like yet another piece of the evidence of God. Because without water, life wouldn't exist, and water is such a bizarre thing to exist that it has to have been created. So I think that it's unlikely that would be the case, but like, if it was, I think that we would have to say what the Catechism says, which is, we have to put our hope and trust in God's universal mercy. That the church puts its hope that nothing is beyond God. The only thing that's promised to us is baptism in water and the Spirit. Like, that's what we're guaranteed. That doesn't mean that God's constrained by that.
Yeah. See, I think that those kinds of reasons are why, if I had to pick a camp, I would say that that Jesus and the Bible and all of that tells just very particularly of human salvation and faith history.
Right.
And that if there was another race, alien race or races or whatever out there, that there would have to be something particular to them that made sense for them and their faith history. in God's creation and what their role is within all that.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't take any kind of elitist view where it's okay. Well, then you're just a creature. Well, you're not a creature like we are creatures, right? Like you lack the soul that we have, and so we're better than you because we have Jesus and you don't. I don't. I think that would be very unhelpful in the great grand scheme of things, and probably cause a war that we would lose.
Probably, yeah. Well, but I mean, the thing that would set them apart realistically is judgment, discernment, the ability to think about thinking, like some of the things that make humans unique among God's creation.
Yeah.
And I imagine we'd have some interesting synods in the church. I imagine, though, that like what we would end up with is if they were obviously thinking creatures, we would end up with God told us to preach to all of creation.
Mm-hmm.
God is not limited by anything that he has created. He's beyond his creation. That's why he's the creator.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to do what God told us, which is to preach to all creation, to spread the gospel. But I suspect that I feel like if we came across a race, especially if it was like a spacefaring race, somebody more advanced than us, I feel like my gut is they would have had their own Paschal event. That God would have manifested to all of his peoples. And the universe is so vast, you have to wonder, what if he created all of this just for us? I mean, it's not necessary.
Mm-mm.
We could have been, I mean, we would have been fine just, on the planet or in just the solar system. Or, I mean, there's so much more out there than was needed for us to love and adore him. And maybe it's just because of his vastness and his greatness and his omnipotence that he would create such a vast universe. But
yeah, I think about those kinds of things to a certain degree. The complexity of existence, to me, is one of the points where that point to God's existence.
Yeah.
Right. And it would be interesting if the entirety of space is empty except for us. Be very strange, though. It seems like it wouldn't make much sense, or like multiverses and stuff. That would be kind of interesting too. What if in every version of the multiverse, Jesus still did exactly like? What if that was the one thing that was consistent across every single multiverse? That Jesus died for humanity instead of a version where we didn't fall, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a hard one. I mean, I think that, again, because God transcends time, because we know that his sacrifice rebounded throughout history, right? Not just into the future, but into the past.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that Mary was kept free from sin.
Yeah.
So much so that those who were trapped in hell were freed by Jesus.
Yeah.
That I don't think it's possible that he didn't die for our sins because he is beyond time. I think ultimately his intrusion into our world and into time is the odd part.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the specialty part. That's the discrepancy. The fact that he died for us is and always will be and always has been true.
Yeah. Betty sent me this thing on Instagram, as she is wont to do, and it was somebody was talking about C.S. Lewis and how Aslan is this Christ-like figure kind of thing,
right? And
whoever is narrating, I don't know if they're quoting someone or if they're, what are the pieces that they're connecting, but they're saying what's the more appropriate metaphor for Jesus in our lives is instead this different author who had written this book, and there's this male character, and what she ends up doing is she writes into the story a character who represents her, the author, and I guess is like the love interest of the guy. But that's a more appropriate metaphor for what God did. He made creation, and he loved us so much that he inserted himself into our story.
Right.
And it was just really a really interesting way of thinking about God entering into our reality through Jesus.
Well, and because he did that, necessarily making us in our unified nature a part of divinity.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, like probably the most flabbergasting mystery of the church is that God is human and divine. Still, today, forever.
Yeah. Yeah, because he didn't have to do that.
No.
It's bananas, man. It's just that I love our faith on an intellectual level so much, because it's you can chew on it and chew on it and chew on it and chew on it, and you're never going to get all of it.
No, you're not.
Yeah. Have you read any of the church fathers?
Not yet. No.
So I made the mistake of starting, and well, and so when I say starting, the starting was the mistake, and the reason it was a mistake is because I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this guy's book and this guy's book, and now I've got a stack of books that, like you were saying, learn when you're reading for the diaconate, like you got to take notes. Mm-hmm. Started reading, and I'm like, oh, I have got to start over. I have to pretend like I have not even started because there's so much there, and I have to read it differently than any other book you would ever read.
Yeah.
Right? Like you pick up some Catholic apologetic book or something like that, or somebody writing about...
like a Scott Hahn book, you don't have to take notes.
Yeah. And so it's just amazing. So I've got like St. Irenaeus, I've got Ignatius's letters, I've got St. Vincent, and it's just, so now I've just got this stack of books, and I'm sitting there looking at these books. They're like in our office, like just sitting there. So I see them every day, and I'm like, okay, now intellectually I've gotten to this point where it's almost like getting hit, and you step back and you're kind of paused and you don't know what you need to do next, kind of thing. But I asked Betty, I said, do you have what are they called, the little sticky note like tabs instead of like dog earring pages or things are interesting, whatever those little sticky note things are.
Yeah, I get the signature tags.
Yeah,
yeah,
like different colors of them and stuff.
I buy those all the time.
Yeah, and so now I've just got to start over and just start digging in, because the thing that has been the most interesting to me is how integrated it all is over time.
Yeah. Well, but you can... So people, I think, they get intimidated by, I'm going to add prayer to my life. They get intimidated by, I'm going to read these books. And we talked about how, like, you're not adding that to your life. That's an upgrade to replace something else. The other thing that I have found useful is when I was doing this training from the Stephen Covey from the Covey Institute, they talked about the power of focus. And they said, look, if you go outside with a magnifying glass and a piece of paper, you can catch the paper on fire. Leave that paper out all day and it's never going to catch on fire. You didn't create any new energy. You didn't do anything other than take a small fraction of what was there and focus it to a point, and you set something on fire. Like, so we could set our souls on fire if we just take a small portion of our week and focus it and look forward to it as a treat. Like, this is, I get to go back and do this. And, you know, if you've got an adoration chapel, go pick an hour per week, and you're going to take your book and you're going to go sit with Jesus and learn more about what he's done in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same kind of concept with Mass. Instead of I have to go to Mass, it's I get to go to Mass.
Right. Well, and it's I love that Father Kevin would preach when he was first here about the Sunday obligation under the rubric of justice. That when somebody loves you that much, it is just to return that love. It is the only appropriate and human response is to return that love. And when somebody loves you as much as God loves you, giving him an hour is the least of what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. What other weird thoughts do you have floating around in your brain?
I talked to you about this one time, and I think this one is simpler. Is it possible that Mary, is it actually possible, logically possible, that Mary would not have been assumed? And the premise for that question is Mary was preserved from sin, which means that she continued to live in original justice and original holiness. The only reason death entered the world was original sin. So is it possible she could have died? Didn't she have to be assumed into heaven as a logical consequence of what we believe about her?
Yeah. So I feel, though, I've either read or heard something regarding Mary that, and this is, again, this is one of those, I hope Father Stephen's listening because he can come clarify in a later episode.
He's going to have like notes. Like, okay, before we get started, I got to correct all these things at Gansle.
Yeah. we gotta go fix some heresies here. So I feel like, though, that I've heard that she did die, but assumed into heaven after her death because she aged. And aging is like, you don't just age to a point and then stop and stay there statically forever. You age to a point of decay and death, right? So as she grew older, like, did Mary have the body of a 14-year-old forever, right? When I think Jesus became incarnate
in Acts, if that was true, probably.
So then she has to have aged.
The evidence for her assumption is partially circumstantial, right? Like there's no shrine to her relics. There's no talk at all about any of her relics, which I
find really interesting.
Yeah, a clear indication that her body is not known anywhere.
Yeah.
So under that, it's possible that the reason she aged isn't because of her sin, but because of the sin of the world around her. I still think she might have been assumed into heaven
prior to death.
And taken out of this world, like been restored to her heavenly body.
So would it have been like falling asleep, as they say in the Bible, like our brethren who have fallen asleep, kind of thing? Do you think maybe Mary just I don't know, went night one time?
Like, I mean, this is all entirely speculative, but I think about it and I wonder, like, is it even possible? Like, could she have been?
Well, there's a lot.
If she hadn't have been, could she have lived to 300 years old and just, maybe her body was wasted away?
Yeah. There's a lot of scriptural support for, like, Mary was by far, and Jesus was by far not the only people who were assumed bodily into heaven.
Right.
So
Elijah.
Yeah. And extra biblically, I guess, but still in tradition, Enoch would have been too. And so you have these other characters who were assumed into heaven. So then it's not far-fetched to think that Mary, preserved from sin through Christ's grace, would be assumed into heaven. And it's not something that was just made up 1,500 years later, right? It's right. Been part of the tradition.
Right, from the first century.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just wonder if she would have had to have gotten old, or else somebody probably would have said something about it.
Well, but maybe she matured. I mean, you've known like 60-year-olds who look like they're in their 40s.
Oh yeah, jerks.
I mean, half of them are actresses, right?
Yeah.
So like that one, there's no way that woman's in her 60s.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, like, is it even logically possible that she could have died if she was preserved from sin throughout her life? Is it even logically possible that she could suffer the consequence of sin if she never sinned and she was preserved from original sin? I do think, like, the world around us, like, she had to live in this world, and it's kind of like, if you had to immerse something clean in filth, like it's going to be covered in filth, but at its essence, it's still in and of itself it was clean.
Yeah, I wonder if the thing that I'm thinking is maybe from the Catechism too, but it's the way it's said at the end of her life. She was assumed to heaven. Like that doesn't explicitly say when she died.
Right.
Just means at the end of her earthly life.
Yeah.
I think it's the Catechism where I'm remembering that.
Maybe, but I think that
yeah, we need
I
some.
think Father Stephen's going to come in and say, guys, like the church has already written about this.
Yeah, well, of course, and that goes
Probably
back.
not about the aliens part though.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's too recent of an idea. Got another few hundred years.
Yeah. What else? I love the weird stuff. I love the weird stuff. Angels are still just fascinating to me.
Yeah, they are.
Just trying to comprehend what it means to be a purely intellectual, spiritual thing.
I've got one for you.
Okay.
So, at the Nativity, the hosts of angels came down and praised God to some shepherds.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think happened to them after that? If that happened to you, wouldn't you spend your entire life following that family around?
Yeah, and they just went back to work.
Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I had an epiphany kind of moment one Christmas because that's the scene, right? And I don't remember if it was something that I heard in a homily or whatever, but it just all of a sudden like it clicked that who protects sheep, shepherds, and who was sent to watch over the baby Jesus, shepherds. Why? Because he's the Lamb of God.
Yeah.
And just that mind blown kind of thing. Just I couldn't comprehend. I was like, how have I never heard or seen this or understood this before? But it was just so fascinating to me that all the little details that they all add up make sense. But yeah, you would think if.
I mean, it's not like somebody said, hey, this is the Messiah. Okay, great. It was glowing, lightning bright angels came down from heaven.
Yeah, and they're like, don't be
Gloria.
scared. Yeah, don't be scared, but we need you to go to this place. Right? Because every time somebody encounters an angel, they're terrified and they fall on their face and they're But you know who doesn't? Mary.
Right.
Which I also find very interesting. When Gabriel comes to her, she's not terrified.
No. Well, maybe he wasn't shining like lightning. Could you imagine if somebody appeared to you and they were as bright as lightning? Like blindingly bright? Like, that's so outside of your human experience. You couldn't even... And like, they're just standing there talking to you while they're glowing blindingly. Like, that would be incredibly scary. So scary.
Yeah. How can you walk away from that? It's like, what did they go do after? They stay a couple days and they're like, all right, we got sheep. We got to go back to sheep.
Jesus just said, come with me. And he got some of those guys to follow. Like, yeah. I would think that family would be following them around. Like, please let us serve you. Please let us, he is we got to tell you about what we saw. Mm-hmm. Because it's banana pants. Like, you're not going to believe what we're about to tell you.
There's a lot of instances, there's a lot of instances similar to that in the New Testament. Who's the guy when they take Jesus, is it to be circumcised or whatever? And there's the old guy.
Simeon.
Who's like, finally I can die now because here's...
Well, and Anna too.
Yeah. And so it's like, why wouldn't you, if people could recognize... The priests in the temple when he's 12, if this kid is teaching with such authority or talking with such authority, and then you're just like, oh, that was neat. Go home, tell your wife about it. And that's it.
Well, and maybe it's the next verse that gives us the hint, because then it's, he came away with Mary and Joseph, and Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. Yeah. Maybe Mary's the only one who is not so broken that she can see clearly. Maybe we're so broken that we're still going to get distracted.
Because how many times...
We're still going to turn to sin. We're still going to turn to, I still have to tend these sheep because I got to feed my family tomorrow.
Yes. How many times have you strayed after you absolutely know God?
And we know the end of the story, and we still sin.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's probably all the explanation you need right there is like, oh, yeah. We're broken. Mary, Betty always wants to know, did she know? Did she know from the very beginning that he was going to be God, or just that there was something special happening? Did she know at this point that he was God? Did she know he was going to die? Like, at what point in time did Jesus sit down with her once when he was 16 or something and say, "Hey, Mom, just so you know, this is how it's going to play out"?
Yeah, I think that part did not happen. I think it goes back to the conversations you and Father Stephen had about angels and perfect knowledge and perfect intellect. Is that our intellect is not perfect. Mary's might have been, although she wasn't created an angel, so I don't actually know that the church teaches about what our intellect would have been without that.
I think
Adam and Eve seem pretty stupid.
Yeah. I think she would absolutely have had imperfect intellect, but
also
perfect ability to consent, right?
Right, but not perfect knowledge. And so, of course, she didn't. She knew. She put faith in what she had been told, and therefore understood that he was the Messiah. But she, I think, had absolutely no idea about what that was going to mean. Which is why twice Luke tells us she pondered these things in her heart. To make sure that we understood, even Mary, who was born without sin, even Mary had to consider this, that God is constantly revealing things to us that we are never going to fully understand. That's part of what's going to make heaven like not that single day on the beach forever, is that we're just going to continue to learn. We're going to continue to learn more about him and about his heart and about his love and about ourselves and about others.
Yeah.
And I suspect that like our curiosity will be fulfilled, but not in the way that we think. Like, I really want to know about these details. Okay, fine. You're going to learn about them, and then you're going to be suddenly full. I think it's going to be like, we'll know those things, but more importantly, we'll know how that all of those threads weave together into the single tapestry of God. And in seeing that picture, will be fulfilled.
Yeah. It's like when you have like a really good steak and you're like, oh, this is so good, and you want it, or when you're full but you still want to keep eating because it's so good. Maybe that it's like you're fulfilled, but you're not satisfied. You can never be satisfied. It's more because you're with God, so it's just nonstop, forever. Yeah.
Well, like being in a marriage.
Yeah.
Like I love my wife, and like I'm joyful in her, and I'm never going to be done. All right. I think we know enough about each other.
Yeah. Fiend. Yeah. How much do you think Joseph knew?
What's so interesting is he never speaks in the Bible. He's never really referenced, other than God told him what to do, and he did it with as far as we can tell, perfect obedience, right? I think implicitly there was something there, because he took somebody to wife that he normally would, like none of his peers would have. He did it in a way that protected her, in a way that most of his peers probably would not have. Like he was going to divorce her in a way that protected her, in a way that none of his peers would have. He took the word from the angel in a dream of the most preposterous thing you could hear, and said, okay. And then, like when they said, get up, go to Egypt, he did. I think he must have realized that something was happening far beyond his ken, and that he fell back on trust and obedience to God, which seemed to be a big part of his character, of his makeup. I think that's probably that great trust in God is probably his primary virtue.
Yeah, because Mary, having that freedom from sin, has the ability to perfectly assent to what God is inviting her to. Right? Joseph doesn't have that.
Yeah. We weren't told that he does.
Yeah, there is a lot of early church tradition. They wondered if he had been assumed into heaven too, because again, there's no body or anything like that. And how can you be that kind of parent figure without some supernatural help? And I don't necessarily think you have to be free from sin to have that supernatural help.
No, we get it every day.
Yeah, but I think a lot of what that must have been like and how much he understood and how much he just was like, Lord, I trust you. Whatever in the world is going on right here, I'm going to keep trusting you.
Right. Well, and he...
Because you're literally the only one in that family who can mess up. You know?
Well, so he, that's iron sharpens iron. So he probably lived up to the standard of who he was. What's the saying that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with?
Yep.
Like his average was probably a lot higher than the rest of us.
Oh, I've never thought of that. That's probably a very good point.
But I think he, I don't think it's necessary that he was assumed to heaven, because if he died before Christ started his ministry, before Christ was 30, then he's just an anonymous carpenter who died, right? Just like so many people around him. And, then, like, Mary's different. Mary was there for the whole time. Mary was there at Pentecost. Mary was there at the cross. Mary was given to the world as their mother. Like, I think that's somewhat different, because they were there for the whole story.
Yeah.
But I think it's beautiful. I think our separated brethren are poor for the lack of devotion to saints because of their examples to us. And St. Joseph's example as a self-sacrificing father, as somebody who puts their trust fully. I mean, man, like, I need that every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Mary, I don't think there's an instance in the Bible where Mary doesn't ask something and God fulfills it, right? Or Jesus as God fulfills it even. Yeah. And Jesus obviously would have had love for his mama, and the thought that she watched him in his crucifixion, and she never once asked for him to stop her pain.
Yeah.
Because, he could have.
Right. But she also, she had a heads up from Simeon.
Yeah. Yep. Was the sword will pierce you or something like that?
Yep.
It's so much to ponder. Yeah.
It is.
Well, man, we've been talking for a minute now, so I think we're probably good for a little bit. I do want to get Father to come in and talk with us on liturgy. Maybe we'll go out and visit him. That'll be fun.
When's
the last time you've been at Mount Carmel?
I've never been to Mount Carmel.
You've never been to Mount Carmel? All right, Father Stephen.
No, some of us aren't, favorites. I think that would be fantastic. And I would love to talk about the Bergsma book, but also Cardinal Ratzinger's book, because I think that so if you read Rome Sweet Home, Scott Hahn talks about liturgy and kind of how important it was, and that's not really something for Protestants, and so like people thought he was turning Catholic because of it. And when you think about the thoughts that Pope Benedict gave us, and that the Church has given us about the importance of liturgy, I think it convinces you that what happens in Mass is important. What happens at Mass is more important than anything else. And like, that's why reverence is so important. That's why active participation, or actual participation is actually how it translates. That's why that's so important, is because there's something happening there that is what we were destined for. We were made for. And we're getting that chance finally to at least in part participate in it. It should be the very center of our universe, because it is the center of the universe. Yeah. So I would love to do that. I'd definitely make time for that, when he's not traveling.
Golly, he just got back from Arkansas. He's been to North Carolina, South Carolina. He is all over the place. They're sending him all over the place right now. So I know he's busy, but yeah, we're definitely going to squeeze some time in with him. So Father, get your appointment book out and pencil us in. So
and also your show notes, the
yeah,
the correctives.
Oh yeah. All the blasphemies that we uttered.
He's gonna come back and say, "John, I need you to stop teaching heresies."
Yeah, right. Well, thanks for joining me, man.
I really enjoyed it.
This is good. And everyone, thanks for listening. And
God bless.
We'll see you next time. Bye.